So our center hosts a few events, webinars. The most notable one of those is called the Social Enterprise, which is a $100,000 award to a social enterprise from across Canada. And so this event is held twice a year, and this year will be in November, we'll be hosting it again and adding a conference for students and for our community to come together and promote awareness on social enterprise, and also to do some skills building and building some capacity around this area. So the other thing that the Trico Foundation Social Entrepreneurship Center does is work with faculty members to develop courses. And we also partner with Phil Grace, for example, and Hunter Hub, so Innovate Calgary and Hunter Hub, to bring programs like Map the System to you, just to showcase that social innovation and social enterprise have a place in society, and obviously you guys are interested, so you might know a little bit. We also amplify the voices of student programs like the National Social Value Fund. Tyson here is one of those members, and try to be a spot where people can look for information and then redistribute to other parts on campus that are doing similar things and where they can get more information and participate. So that's about all. I'll pass it off to, is it James next?
Sure, James.
Yes, it's me next. So first off, thanks very much for inviting me onto this panel. It's a pleasure to be here and looking forward to the discussion. But before we get into it, I'll just explain a little bit about my role and where I come at this subject area from. So, so James Gammage, I'm Director of Innovation and the Social Impact Lab at the United Way of Calgary and area. So that's a bit of a mouthful. Let's just explain that. The United Way looked at its operation a few years ago, 3 years ago now, and in response to what we were seeing in the marketplace, our standard model where we collect money from donors and then we pass it to our client agencies. We thought we needed to shake that up a little, in response to reducing donations through the impact of the economy over the last few years. Digital disruption, you might have heard of Benevity that is in the donation and social impact space, big unicorn from Calgary, but obviously affected our donors and the income that we were getting from them, but also a recognition that our donors were wanting to see a little bit more than just giving us money to pass out to our agencies, and certainly younger cohorts of leaders are more interested in line of sight for their donations. So the Social Impact Lab was created as a result of that. So the lab itself is a collaboration between the United Way and J5, which is a design and innovation consultancy based in Calgary. So we created the Social Impact Lab, and it's really to move the United Way from that serving model where we hand out money to agencies to a solving model, whereby within the lab, we try and solve the problems that are out there in the community. We move from intervention to prevention. So that was the rationale for the lab, created about 3 years ago. I actually have only been with the Social Impact Lab for almost a year now. My own background is in innovation in financial services and private organizations. When I think about how we come at this subject area of social enterprises, we do a few things to both help our agency community to rethink their organizations, as well as generating new solutions within the United Way. So from an agency point of view, we run a program called Inspire, which is a design thinking led program to help agencies rethink or address big problems that they might have. And often the solutions are potential social enterprises. So, we'll be generating potential social enterprises through the Inspire program. But also the Social Impact Lab looks to solve some of the big issues, community or citizen issues we see in Calgary. We've worked on children and youth mental health issues. We've worked on food security and the big area of poverty. And what we're trying to do in the lab is to really, using a design thinking approach, understand the problems of the client population, and then build solutions in an iterative design-led way to solve those problems. Now, the solutions might be just sort of social solutions that we might get a donor for, and we're not seeking any kind of financial return or social, but just a social return. Or they might be social enterprises, for which, in fact, we have a couple of ideas in the stocks at the moment that are going through the process, which have potential to be social enterprises. So we're looking to obviously look for investors for those and to fund those social enterprises. And we need to be really cognizant of how we're going to do that and how we're going to measure success from an SROI point of view. So that's where we come at that from the United Way point of view, and really interested in the discussion that we're going to have about social enterprise.
Thank you, James. Phil from Innovate Calgary.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Again, thanks for having me, Ryan, and also I'm really interested in the discussion that we're going to have. I guess a little bit of a disclaimer. I'm fairly new to Innovate Calgary. I just started in November, so I'm by no means an expert on all things that we do here at Innovate Calgary. But I'll give you a brief overview. So Innovate Calgary is a separate entity from the University of Calgary, but it's wholly owned by the University of Calgary. We were traditionally the technology transfer office. So basically, if a researcher were to come up with a great new innovation or a great new invention, and they would like to either patent that or copyright or trademark, we would help them with that process. And we've since kind of grown to be more of a business incubator than simply just a transfer office. So we have some fellowship programs in life sciences, in engineering, and also, I guess, the newest team at Innovate Calgary is our team, which is the clinical and social innovation team. So where our area of focus is looking at those kind of I suppose non-traditional innovations on campus. So not as straightforward as somebody who has created a device that they would then like to sell into the market. We work with people who may have developed a new intervention for helping care providers be more compassionate as they are caring for patients with cancer, is one example of something that we've done. Helping young parents be better prepared. So all this very evidence-based research, and what we're trying to do is try to create or help researchers sustain the impact of their research and of their innovations beyond the grant. So typically in academia, you have a grant, clearly lays out how you're going to spend the money. Once that money is gone, you move on to the next grant. And so sometimes it can be hard to see that innovation that the product of your research live on in beyond the grant and outside of academia. So that's one area that we really focus on. And I'll talk about one program in particular that I think might be relevant to some people on this call, is the Catalyze program, which I know that some people here are familiar with. The Catalyze program is basically, it's a type of fellowship internship where in the summer, in 2021, we're starting May 3rd, where we partner undergraduate and graduate students with a social venture that is either community-based or spinning out of the university. And those students work closely, they basically work as a partner with those organizations to help build capacity within the organization. And that, the tasks of the internship range from business and fund development to financial modeling, market research, marketing communication strategy, even some strategic planning, depending on what the student, what types of skill sets the student brings to the table, and where the needs of the partner organization are. So that those applications should launch on Friday if everything goes according to plan, and close on March 15th. So it's a fairly tight timeline, but it's a great opportunity to really get a sense of what it's like to work in a social enterprise, especially in the startup phase, to see kind of what are the needs, what it's like. It's really this based on experiential learning. And I guess I'll plug one more thing from Innovate Calgary too that might be relevant to people on this call. If you go on the social innovation page on innovatecalgary.com/social innovation, we have a webinar series that we've recorded and we've posted them all. So there's some really good information there. It's called Designing Social Impact webinar series. So I'd encourage you to check that out if you'd like to learn a bit more. I'll leave it there and hand it over to Neil.
Great, thanks, Phil. Thanks, Ryan and everyone for having me. So my name is Neil. As Ryan mentioned, I graduated from the Haskayne MBA program recently in 2019. Having been an entrepreneur previously, I was on the lookout for a new problem to work on during my tenure at Haskayne. And during the final months of my MBA, when most of my cohort was like hunting for jobs frantically, it dawned on me to take a closer look at bridging the gap between job seekers and employers, and their expectations from the recruitment process. And this is what led me to co-founding Talency, which is a job seeker focused tech platform that helps employers take the shortest and quickest path to conducting interviews with pre-qualified talent. And so with Talency, I had the unique privilege of connecting with hundreds of job seekers, HR professionals, and hiring managers. And I feel like I have a good grasp of the job market, the challenges faced by candidates, and the strategies to overcome some of those challenges. So yeah, that's a bit about my background.
Thanks, Neil. I'd encourage everybody on the call, if they have questions, to put them in the chat. I'll kick it off with a question to Phil. We have this title, Social Enterprises. What is a social enterprise and how does it differ, say, from a nonprofit?
Well, that's a big question. And I don't know if the other panelists may disagree with me. I tend to think of a social enterprise as this very broad umbrella of an organization. And maybe it's because of my background. So I guess by way of context, my background worked in the not-for-profit sector for the previous 4 years. And then before that was running a social purpose business, which was set up as a for-profit business, even though we never made a profit. But so it goes sometimes. So I think of a social enterprise as an organization agnostic of its form of incorporation, for profit or not, that seeks to have a financial return or financial sustainability, but also is really driving towards social impact. That social return on investment that James was mentioning, that's really where I define a social enterprise as agnostic of the form of incorporation. One of its core values and at its bottom line is social impact is part of that bottom line. And I know you asked me the question, but I would open it up to the rest of the panel to provide their descriptions.
James, you have a description of?
No, I would echo what Phil said. There's an element of a financial and social return with the social enterprise. Now, one of the things that we're grappling with, we're learning this space as well within the United Way, is sort of how do you balance that? When we're going out to investors, to what extent are they willing to mitigate their financial return, the potential financial return, if there's a social return? But no, I'd agree with Phil in his description of what a social enterprise is. And it is pretty broad. It's pretty broad, but there needs to have that element of social return within it.
What's the case for organizations, why should they measure their social impact?
Well, for a number of reasons. Obviously, an organization that's seeking investors might, certain investors are just going to want a financial return. There are other investors that are social investors that might mitigate their financial return for if an organization creates a social return as well. And an organization needs to be able to tell that story to those type of investors. Needs to be able to explain what the social return is. Now, they can do that in financial terms, but at the end of the day, to be able to actually explain that, they need to measure it somehow. And actually, if they can convert it into a financial a number, obviously that's a lot easier. But yeah, it's to investors to be able to tell the story of the benefit that they're trying to bring, both socially and financially within the community.
Oh yeah, we're seeing a lot more interest in social financing and social investing. Where do you see social impact investment going over the path in the next 5 years, and how can we help build that capacity going forward?
It's a very interesting question. I think before I answer this one, I just want to add to your previous question, and that was, I lost my train of thought. So let's do that again. So where do I see things going in the next 5 years? I think people, oh yeah, I remember now. People are looking to be employed by organizations that have a purpose. And people are also trying to vote with their dollars and are more concerned about how what they're spending makes a difference rather than just putting into the pockets of the large or giant organizations. So to your question about where things are going in the next 5 years, I think organizations like Local Investing YYC or other funds that support social enterprises are going to have a much larger impact in the sense that they will gain a lot more traction and are gaining a lot more interest. So I think even as we look at the student population coming into universities, it looks a lot like the undergrads, and even some of the grads are more interested in this type of work. And we're creating a lot of opportunities for students to get involved into kind of investing with USEED. And I think James and Phil can speak a little more to that because they're more involved with the USEED social impact that is going to be launching in the next week or so. There's also the National Social Value Fund, which gives opportunities to students to look at financing from this lens. And also there's a Haskayne USEED Fund, which allows students to learn how to invest, maybe not in social enterprise, but at least get those tools from a time when they're still in university.
Do you ever see it coming to a point where we stop calling it social enterprises and we just call them enterprises, or we call them social impact investing and we just call it investing?
That's actually my dream. So right now, part of my role is to source projects for a capstone program in the MBA program. And to me, social enterprises are just, they're a business for students to study. It's a different business model, but encompasses many stakeholders and not just shareholders. So yeah, definitely, this is what I would like to see, that social enterprises are just understood as enterprises, just a different business model, but it doesn't need to be identified as a social enterprise, because we're seeing a lot of businesses that are coming up that don't actually identify themselves as social enterprises, but they could be considered that way if we look at them through our lens.
I think, if I can jump in there, I think that's yeah, makes a really good point. I think the need for purpose in an organization is from an employee point of view. I think employees we're hearing are choosing organizations based on the purpose of the organization and all sorts of ESG factors, and I think that's only going to increase. We see a huge interest from the university population in social enterprises, and I would love that that vision that you laid out, both of you laid out, that it just becomes enterprise investment as opposed to social enterprise investment, or it becomes just the norm that organizations have to have that social element of return to really thrive, or actually operate in the marketplace.
Can I also jump in? I like what Ali was saying, and I think if we're looking forward, even not just at the university level, but taking a big step back society-wide, we're seeing trends that people care more and more about where their dollars go, whether that is investment or, I said I spent 3 years in not-for-profit fundraising, looking at the trends, and especially the younger population that's coming up, that is getting more of that disposable income, that can choose to either invest it or donate it. They want to know that their funds are having an impact. I don't see that changing. If anything, I see it growing. So I think that's a pretty solid indicator that this isn't going away. And I will echo that. I love that vision of, it's just investing. It's just where, if you're not doing something with a social impact, then the business model is flawed.
Yeah.
Neil, you started in Talmacy, and it's quite clear that you care about bettering job seekers. How did you choose the business model? Why didn't you choose a nonprofit versus a social enterprise?
Yeah. So just to kind of like echo and add to Phil, James, and Alia's point, I think the whole model of the 80s model, greed is good. You cannot be a social impact corporation unless you're a not for profit. I think that ship has sailed, and the new reality is that social impact or social impact foundations, or B Corps as they're known, are really the call of the day. It's people have realized that there is more to a corporation, a company, than just profits, and it's what impact they have on their community and what good they also do while generating those profits. With Talmacy, I did think a lot about going the for-profit versus the not-for-profit route, and I truly believe that being a company that has a vision to do social good and being for profit, you can do a lot of good, with all the resources that are available to you with a for-profit organization versus a not-for-profit. Not to say not-for-profit organizations can't do a lot of impact, but you are limited in the resources that you do have at your disposal to make an impact. And furthermore, I think a lot of founders nowadays have a social impact vision for their company. The way I look at Talmacy is if we can give every single person that's on Talmacy, every single candidate, the most ideal job that they can possibly get, and we pair them up with the best job, they then go they then are satisfied with their jobs. They take that satisfaction back home, to their families. So their spouses are more happier, less conflict. You never bring the baggage from work back home. Any kind of opportunities that you get at growth, you always take them. You don't have second thoughts, and it just creates this broader impact of better, happier communities. So that's how I look at Talmacy. I don't know. Does that answer the question?
Yep. Do you see the social good that you've created with Talmacy as a side effect, or do you see it as more of an integral to your business?
I mean, there are no side effects as such. I mean, only good things, so I wouldn't say it's there are no negatives. The way recruitment was focused till now was like, the good thing and the bad thing about recruitment in North America is that as a candidate, you'd never have to pay for anything. You know, like if you're meeting up with a recruiter, you shouldn't pay. You know, and that's like legally you're bound not to charge the candidate, which is good. But it's also bad in a way that now the candidate gets left behind in most of the decision making. You know, so if you're not a fit for the right job, you get left behind. You know, you never hear back from a recruiter, or you never hear back from a company. And that's something that we wanted to change. We wanted to have more, because at the end of the day, the candidates are the ones that you know, have to really deal with like rejection, and they have to like cater their resumes and apply to thousands of different places just to hear no. And it's kind of lost opportunity and lost time for the candidates. So if there was like a better way, which we think we kind of like are trying to do, where you could like, you know, apply to your best ideal job without like having to cater your resume to thousands of different places, and not like you know, apply to specific companies, but the companies kind of choose your skills and find you as a perfect match for their company. So in that way, like it does do good, you know, even for the employers that are hiring these candidates, and for the candidates themselves.
James, I'll have this question for you, but I'll open it up to everybody on the panel. When you're measuring social impact, how do you safeguard the benefits of that you can't measure? So say if you're measuring X, but you're also doing Y and Z, sometimes when you put a measurement or put a success level on to X, you kind of forget about the other things that you do. How do you safeguard the little bit of more work pieces of work that you do, say?
Sure.
Yeah. So, sorry, was to me, but yeah. Yeah. So measuring social impact is really difficult, not least for the fact that humans are involved, and you know, this isn't like it's not like the laws of physics when, you know, X times Y equals Z. You know, there are lots of vagaries in working, you know, with humans in the sort of cause and effect, and you know, and things like, you know, the time value of money works from a financial point of view, but actually, what about benefit over a period of time? And how do you attribute value between, you know, the whole population and what we call the client population? You know, how do you identify that? So there are all sorts of vagaries associated with that, and you know, whether you can do that accurately or not, there's still you know, to answer your question, there's still a story that needs to go to accompany what you're measuring, and then, you know, I don't think we do you know, I think we're still learning in the United Way around some of the social enterprise opportunities that we're creating about how to measure the potential benefits. But it's got to be accompanied with a story about, you know, how you can change the life of, you know, X number of people by, you know, from Neil's point of view, getting them well-paid employment, or how you can change the life of a family by bringing them, you know, food in a dignified manner. You know, so I think there's a storytelling element to the measuring as well that you mustn't lose sight of when telling that story.
Yeah, I think just to add to James, what James mentioned, and echoing something that James said, that, you know, it really also, like, as someone in like a leadership position, as long as your kind of values and heart is in the right place, so to speak, if you wanted to do social impact, you know, all of the metrics that you know, measure the social impact will follow, you know. as long as you have your vision set to do social good in the long term, that's how your decision would like decisions that you go around social impact will be made. That's how like people working with you under you will kind of follow in that direction. And eventually, yeah, those metrics will start showing up. Like take the example of Benevity. Like when Benevity started, they didn't have like all of these top-notch like companies like in the valley. Like Google wasn't one of their first companies that used Benevity. And so later on, once you have those set of values and other companies, also like echo those values, you would see that your impact is outreaching, and then those become your new metrics, to see what social good you can do.
How would you,
Go ahead, Ryan.
go ahead,
Oh,
Phil.
sure. I guess I would. The one thing I would add to is that I think echoing Neil, I appreciate the kind of keep doing good, and eventually you look back and you've done good. And I really like James's point about the storytelling. Really, we're so used, especially in measuring success. We tend to love round numbers because you can add it up and you can say, I have done 5 + 5, and here we are with 10.
Yeah.
It's a bit harder with social impact. So it's about gathering the elements that make up a good story. But I think there is some rigor there as well in really trying to identify the causality of what you're doing. So within a specific time period, within this specific population, our enterprise, whatever it is, was able to create this change or have this impact. And knowing what you're trying to achieve is important, because then you can say, we're working. I feel like oftentimes it's not necessarily a finish line, but it's a continuum that you're moving closer to this these ever moving goalposts. But I would suggest anybody who's interested in measuring social impact, check out the Common approach. It's a really good baseline for understanding or for beginning the process of measuring. They say this is a bare minimum. It's certainly not the gold standard, but it allows, I guess, anybody who is hoping to have social impact to just even begin thinking about how we might want to track what we're doing in terms of impact.
Is there any advice that you'd have for students or for people that are looking at implementing social impact? Or is there any advice for them so that they can avoid designing poor metrics? And are there any thou shall nots of when it comes to designing social metrics?
I think it's really important to know what your values are and listen to the people whose problem you're trying to solve. Those skills that we are trying to call real skills rather than soft skills, I think are really important in this space. Because if you just go in, I think there's a book called Heropreneurship that talks about just trying to solve a problem without listening actually creates different types of problems. And so learning those skills of empathy and compassion and active listening, I think, are really important in this space. And yeah, I think what Neil was saying, like keep doing what you're doing for the right reasons, and not just to say, that you've created this in order to do something, but because there is impact that is there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would.
Sorry, go ahead.
Nope, you go ahead.
So just to add to Alia's point as well, yeah, don't get too concerned about like if you're like causing the right kind of impact that you want, because as long as you talk to the people that you're wanting to create the positive impact towards, and they're giving you positive feedback. As long as you have those communications open, you're gonna do good, you know. If you just keep at it, you know, keep building whatever, you know, product or services that you're offering. Just you know, get feedback, do them. And this is one of the things that Catalyst really taught me when I attended that program, was that discovery is quite important. So, you know, always talk to the people that you want to create the impact for. And yeah, as long as, you know, as I mentioned, you know, your values are in alignment with their values, and you know, you are passionate about solving that problem, you know, you'll eventually get there.
Yeah, I would add to, you know, Alia started with basically human-centered design. So we through Map the System, I'm going to use some Map the System themes here because I think it's a really good program to frame some thinking around this. So last night, actually, we had a human-centered design workshop with the group from J5, so which is also relevant to James. Yeah, so I won't touch on the human-centered design because I think you did a really good job with that, Alia and Neil. But I will just touch more broadly on understanding the system that you're trying to change. That's rather than going in with, you know, here is the problem, here is the solution. Take a step back, and then take another step back, and then take another step back, and figure out, like, is this actually the problem? And is this a solution, or is it just a band-aid that is so far downstream that you're always going to be treading water? Or if you're, you know, is there a way that you can impact change higher upstream? I'll just leave it at that. From a student perspective, if you happen to be around as a student again next year, we'll be running Map the System again. That's you know, some tools to get into it. It's a really good exercise for framing how to think about some of these problems. And then kind of as a word of advice, I suppose, would be reach out and talk to people. Reach out to Innovate Calgary, reach out to Trico Center, to Social Impact Lab, or founders like Neil, who have done this before, and get as much information as you can, because every problem is going to be so different. You're not going to have perfect solutions handed to you, but the more tools you can have in your toolbox, the better, I think, chances are of success in the space.
And I of course would echo the importance of human-centered design in creating a solution that really solves the problem of your clients or citizens or community. The one thing I would add from a structure point of view, is think about sort of the theory of change model. You know, what inputs, what outputs, what outcomes, and, you know, what impacts you're going to have. And maybe, you know, everything we do, you know, we obviously build it around solving a problem for a group of individuals, but actually in actually structuring it and working out what metrics we might use to measure its success, we use a theory of change model or a logic model to really work through that and define what the benefit's going to be. So yeah, just throw that in there as well.
So for a lot of these problems, they kind of rely on baseline data to really measure your impact that you're having. How do you tackle problems when there is really no baseline data to really base your impact on?
I think for Talency, when we were starting out, it was a similar kind of situation that we found ourselves in. There is not a lot of data to create like a marketplace for the recruitment services that were out there. And so what helps is just talking to industry experts, talking to people who are affected, you know, by the problem you're trying to solve. And yeah, just talking to a lot of people in general will kind of be the first, like the right place to start. You know, investigating, and it'll like slowly and surely you'll get to where you want to go, you know, getting the full breadth of the problem. is how I would suggest you go about it.
Yeah, echo that. Just really understanding the problem you're trying to solve before jumping on a metric, and whether that metric actually fits the problem you're trying to solve. So really focus on that, and then if you need to sort of create baseline metrics at that stage to prove your success or otherwise. But it starts with understanding the problem.
I think you, following up on both what James and Neil said, yeah, you're creating your own baseline data by going out to talk to people. Then you define where things are as they stand.
If I can say something, we actually saw a gap in cycling safety to buy and sell bikes, as well as to I don't know, there's just no, also people don't seem to understand that the same road, same rules. So we figured we'd be able to start the bike swaps as a nonprofit, use our life savings for good. And it was a win-win. We had about 15,000 attendees in 2019, our last bike swap. So yeah, donated a lot of bikes to UFC as well.
Thank you.
For me, it's a gap. It's when you see a gap, that's how you fix the problem. So I'm a tech in real life, so okay.
So Phil, you work with a lot of social enterprises. I know you're new in this role, and have you noticed like a commonality between the social enterprises that can grow steadily versus the social enterprises that kind of flounder around and say in 2 years disappear?
That's a good question. So the ones that we work with the university, usually if they get to a point where they're starting a social enterprise, there's been so much work that has gone into getting to that kind of starting point, if you will, that I think my sense is, again, being fairly new, but my sense is we at the university and the ecosystem within the university that supports these new ventures has supported the social enterprise enough to make sure that the right people are there and they're kind of on the right path. Now, that's not to say that everybody's going to be super successful, but yeah, you need to have that motivation, I suppose, to really be in it to win it, really. And I suppose the ones that aren't successful that we see as they come through Innovate Calgary, it's usually because they're not really the researcher. When we work with researchers who are trying to commercialize, and so sometimes the researcher just doesn't have the motivation. Oftentimes researchers are not going to leave their tenured positions to go start a social enterprise. So sometimes they just haven't found that right mix of people to take their idea forward. So I think, yeah, at an individual, it's the team level is really quite key. And then, I guess this might be straying a little bit from your question, but even further upstream, we see a lot of innovators who don't think that they're innovators, or that they don't, we're reaching out to people in the Faculty of Arts who, commercialization and social enterprise and innovation is that we don't really play in that field. I'm doing my own really cool research, but then we have a bit of a conversation with them, and then it's like, oh, maybe I could explore this. Maybe, yeah, we should think about how this is going to live on sustainably. And it doesn't have to be that they start their own social enterprise. It might be we partner with a community partner who's already playing in that space, and then they can kind of incorporate that innovation. But yeah, I think that's the motivation and the right people to drive a social enterprise forward, but then also understanding that lots of people are doing social innovation. They just may not see it yet.
Neil, with your Talnacy, you have this primary goal and your primary impact. Then you also have secondary and tertiary impacts. How do you identify those impacts, and how do you approach expanding upon those impacts of your primary action?
Well, the way we do it at Talency is like we set up goals around the primary objective, you know. So it almost should be like, whatever you're trying to hit as your secondary and tertiary goals should kind of be complemented by what you're trying to primarily achieve. So the way we set up, and just one example is like we really wanted to create impacts for candidates. That was our primary objective, but we also wanted to fix the recruitment system, which was a secondary object, and we also wanted to get like the recruiter space or the recruitment agencies out of the mix, and that was our third objective. And so we primarily started with focusing on what the problems and challenges candidates were facing, and built a solution around that, which kind of addressed the other two issues as well. And so I would just say, like, whatever your primary objective is, try to set up goals and any kind of vision that you have for where you want to go around that primary thing, and then make sure that you can also address the other things along the way. I think it's the most effective way to kind of do any kind of like achieve any kind of impact, whether it be social or any other in that way. I hope that answers your question.
So we were supposed to have a networking session. I think the group's small enough that we can just all stay in this room. I'd like to give this opportunity to a couple of the people on this call to really introduce themselves a little bit more. I know Tyson, you're from the Calgary Social Value Fund. Do you want to give us a quick intro about who you are? And sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, no worries. That sounds good. So yeah, my name is Tyson Bilton. I'm just in my final year of a finance and sustainability degree at U of C. About a year and a half ago, with 5 other students at Haskayne, I co-founded the Calgary Social Value Fund, which if we come back to that social enterprise definition, it's a student-run impact fund that invests in Calgary-based social purpose organizations or social enterprises. So the way that we look at what a social enterprise is we have to see that the social or environmental impact of this organization is really integrated into its business model. So it's not necessarily a buy one, give one model, or an organization that's for profit and just donates a percentage of their revenues to charity. It really comes down to, does an additional sale of a product or service equate to a direct impact in the community as well? So these are the opportunities that we're looking at. We actually held our launch event at the Social Impact Lab fall 2019. So I don't know if you were around at that time, James, as well, but we had a great event there, which was awesome. And then we actually just launched our recruitment initiative on Monday. So we have applications that are open for the next 3 weeks. Those are closing on March 14th. And yeah, so the opportunity is for any undergrad student at any post-secondary institution in Calgary with at least 2 years remaining in their degree. So I believe I can share my screen if that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah, so looking back, this is through, we're supported by the National Social Value Fund. So there are social value funds in Vancouver, Calgary, Kingston, London, and Montreal, with a hope to expand to most communities in the country over the next few years. So Social Innovation Academy is funded by HSBC, and this is the organization that runs both of these programs. So the fellowship program on the left, that's a 7-month program that isn't restricted to students. It can be any youth aged 18 to 30 who are looking to enter the social innovation and impact investment space. So both programs, you go through different weekly workshops, professional development, networking opportunities. And then if we want to look at the associate program, this is the one that I had mentioned is just for post-secondary students. But this opportunity, if anyone was looking for some additional info, I can link the opportunity in the chat. And then we are hosting a info session next Friday at 11:30 a.m. And that's going to be a national call with all of the funds and then different breakout rooms for Calgary. So you'll be able to select which city you wanted to join from. I'll probably just leave it at that. But if anyone had any questions.
Thanks. Laura, do you want to give a quick shout out to your organization and what you represent?
Thank you.
You're muted. Thanks, Tyson.
Sorry. Hi, sorry. I think after all these conversations today. Okay, I fund and operate a private nonprofit. My husband and I fund it out of our life savings because we're old and stupid. That's what you do. And we run Alberta Bike Swap. If you've seen bike racks anywhere in the city, we've built them. We've always donated more than half the profit back to the community. We couldn't find a safe place to buy or sell bikes, so we found a gap. And we also knew that most people, my worst cycling accident, I've been cycle commuting for more than 50 years, was actually in the cycle track. Somebody didn't realize they had to stop at a stop sign. They plowed into me and it sheared my molars off with the impact. Bad accident. So let's teach safe cycling. Let's do it. So that's what we do, is we fund safe cycling in the province as well. Same road, same rules. And then I studied infection control. I did pharmacy first, then I have a degree in math and computer science, but I've also studied infection control. And I've been promoting the use of cloth face masks for since February of last year. So I came up with a design for cloth face masks, and we've been selling them as a social enterprise. We're zero waste as well because we vermicompost everything. My business partner is in Cypress County, and we pay farm women a living wage to sew. And then every single little thread gets thrown into this. My business partner actually sets up these huge worm digesters in places like Goodwill, because they'll get a torn sheet or one sock or something. They throw them into that. And then she gets these farm women to sew these little cloth bags, and they sell the vermicompost. So it's zero waste. So yeah, so I do two things. I'm useful bags and masks, and I'm on. So yeah, we're not going to make money on it, but you know what the heck.
Jessica, do you want to give a quick introduction about who you are and what you're looking about for social enterprise?
Well, what I'm finding right now within the province of Alberta is they're trying to get rid of nonprofits through the Civil Society Fund. We can no longer get any funding. I hired students through SKIP, Servant Community Internship Program, as well as the STEP program. Can't do that anymore. So I'm not sure if anybody else I was looking for discussion about that, about the Civil Society Fund, which is just promoting social enterprise, which is for profit. So yeah, life isn't about money. Sometimes, life is actually about giving back to society. So.
Thank you, Laura. Anybody else want to take themselves off mute and introduce themselves? Well,
sorry, I wasn't quite sure whether anyone else wanted to go, just because, again, we only have 2 minutes. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. But I get, again, great to be able to attend this event, and was very thankful for being able to hear a lot of your insight in terms of these questions. In terms of introduction, I guess I'll go really quick to give anyone else a chance to introduce themselves. Third-year students studying at University of Calgary, doing combined degree in business and global development. I keep seeing Tyson everywhere around all these events, which is great, but I've really interested in a lot of your organizations. I had a mentor who worked at Innovate Calgary last year, and I was able to meet Eleanor from Trico Center a week ago or so through the event, and I was also able to attend the social enterprise lunch that occurred in the BMO forum last year before quarantine and all the craziness happened. So I'm very interested in social enterprise. Had quite a few questions I wanted to ask. So as long as everyone's okay with that, I'd love to connect with many of you on LinkedIn later and ask you questions following that. Yeah, hopefully that gives a minute for anyone else to introduce themselves.
Everett, Kim, Kaylin. Well, I think this almost wraps up the session. I'd like to thank all of the panelists here, Phil, James, Alia, Neil, for giving up your time to talk to us. I know that U of Calgary is having the Social Innovation Week. Alia, do you mind just giving a plug for that with the details?
Yeah, so Social Innovation Week will be a number of webinars and events held from March 15th to 19th. So various units on campus will be hosting different webinars, and my center is doing one in collaboration with Hunter Hub on social enterprises and business models that can help not-for-profits make the transition or add to their organization. And I think, Phil, you guys are doing one too?
Yes, we are. We're doing a few. We're doing one around USEED. We are doing one around, it's just going to be a seminar on, or a webinar, I suppose, on habits for resilient change makers. So how change makers themselves can have some habits for resilience. And then, yeah, the innovation at Calgary sampler with Alia and the folks from Hunter Hub.
So yeah, keep an eye out on your inbox. Sorry, I interrupted. Inbox, that information hopefully is coming out early next week with all of the links to register so that you can pick the ones that you want to attend or get the recordings after the fact.
Well, it is 1 o'clock and I'm determined to not take up any more of your time. So have an excellent day and feel free to reach out to us and we'll send an email with contact information.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah,
Thanks for the
Bye-bye.
opportunity. Well.
Pleasure.